Hello everyone and welcome to the next chapter. In this chapter we're going to start checking the King's Indian defense, one of the most common ways for black to play in an aggressive way against the move 1 d4. So we're of course going to continue here with c4, and although the main way to play the King's Indian defense is with g6, we're also going to check a few move orders now with the move to d6, and even in some of the last chapters we're gonna also check some other move orders, but this way this don't get like a forever chapter and is more clear. So after the move d6, I have to mention that our move now will be knight f3 in order to avoid some e5 possibilities very quickly. Well, g6 of course an option here. Move like bishop g4 we don't really care a lot about. We can simply go knight c3, e4 is an idea. And to be honest, taking on f3 is never an issue. You can continue with ef3, followed by g3, bishop g2 and f4. That's completely fine. Even playing like bishop e3, queen c2 and h4 is also giving you a good advantage. And even taking with the g pawn is actually really good. So it's a matter of the style. Is not really a good line for black. And actually, after knight bd7, we are even playing h3, and when he takes, we can take back. And again, a plan like this is very easy to play and continue with a lot of advantage for the white pieces. So this is not really an order we care a lot about. Playing g6 will be a much more interesting order. Now we go knight c3, and the only move we have to check here that is not transposing will be to play bishop to f5, trying to avoid e4 from us, right? And this line is actually it got quite popular some years ago, although people is not playing it that much nowadays. Our plan will be to quickly play queen b3, trying to attack here on b7, trying to, well, create some weaknesses or force the queen to a square that is not really happy with, like c8. And now we'll continue in a very similar way to what we are going to do in our main lines. So that's why my recommendation is to play h3. And the plan is to very quickly go with g4. So for instance, bishop g7, we go g4, bishop has to go back, and then we can go with e4. Well, simply complete development, continue with bishop e3 ideas, and then we can go bishop e2 and consider even long castle with a really great advantage. In case of v6, same idea, we go h3, bishop g7, same idea, we go g4. Super easy, super simple to play this, as you can see. And okay, bishop can go either to d7 or c8. In case of bishop d7, we'll go bishop g2 now, trying to get some attack on the diagonal. Knight c6 normal. Now knight a5 is kind of a threat, so we should avoid it. Queen c2 is the best. And after castle, we have this funny move, bishop g5. In case of h6, we can always come back to e3. Otherwise, queen d2 is an idea, and we can also castle long or short. Both are possible, and both are going to give you a really nice advantage. In case of bishop c8, it's very similar. You just go bishop g2, bishop b7, continue here with queen c2, controlling e4, and after castle, simply playing with castle is going to give you a really nice edge. Continue with e4 in the next move. Very simple line, to be honest. It's not like many people play like this, but I just wanted to briefly mention how to play against this order. And now let's focus on the key line and the key idea, which is of course the move to g6. You already know we play knight c3 here, bishop g7, e4 is actually not making a difference if we place d6 or castle. So let's say castle and knight f3. And this will be kind of the main position in the King's Indian, where actually after the move d6 we get to the main position. We also will very briefly check the move c6. That is an option, not really an option that black plays a lot anymore, but it's an option. Now it will be very easy. We simply develop. Bishop e2 is a normal and nice move. Black could try to play something like d6, trying to get to something natural, but actually you can just continue in the main way by playing h3. And after knight bd7, we'll see that later, but every time black plays with c6, playing with short castle is much safer. And the reason behind that is that when you short castle and he plays e5, you can go d5, and with c6 played, you are kind of guaranteed that the queen side will get open. Like these plans, like knight h5 and all this stuff, is not really that dangerous anymore. He could of course try to close everything like this, but then you have some really nice plans by playing king h1 and g4. You have a model game with this plan that is very nice. And in case of cd5, you always take with the c-pawn, and then just immediately brings pieces to the queen side. So something like knight c5 is natural, just defend the pawn. Queen c7 is threatening this. You can just play queen c1, queen b1, continue with bishop e3, rook b1, b4 ideas, and this is actually a really nice position for the white pieces. Anyway, all of this is really secondary. To be honest, if he plays c6, probably he wants to play d5. And now the plan is again very simple. You want to go e5, getting a lot of space. Knight should go to e4, probably playing knight e8 is a bit sad. There is, again, many different options. Even h4 is a very interesting idea here, but this is very easy and good. Take, and h3. You simply want to finish development like castle, bishop e3, rook c1. You simply have a lot of space, and black position is not really something I would like to play myself. 94 will be better. Now we can simply castle. We don't really have a hurry to take on e4, and now black's idea is to take here, and try to play something like c5. But to be honest, after rook e1, this just seems to be like a weird Grunfeld where, well, black just lost many tempos and they are not really getting what they want to get. So this is just a lot of advantage for white again. So let's focus finally on d6, which is the main move. And now my recommendation would be to play h3. And now let's try to explain a bit what are the ideas for the white pieces in this position. So of course, in general, black ideas to go e5, then we'll play those positions always closing with d5. We'll be playing with a very flexible king on the center for actually a quite, I mean, I wouldn't say like a super long time, but a long time. And our plan is always to play like after e5, d5, want to play bishop g5, you want to force h6, then every time you are coming back to e3. If he ever attack e4, you want to play with knight d2, you play like bishop e2, queen c2, and then you consider either if you want to castle short or long. Usually if you play with c6, we'll castle short. If you play without c6, we'll castle long. Anyway, we're going to see now a bit of the possibilities. I mean, we're going to see like a lot of orders. This position always have 1,000 different orders, and that's why I want you to understand the ideas, not really trying to memorize everything, but if you understand the ideas, you will be able to play this position really well, even if you don't remember the exact theory. So this is very important. Okay, so for instance, let's check first some of the secondary weird moves, like knight c6, for instance, which is not a really great move. Now you can simply go d5. Of course, something like knight b8 is not really an issue. You can just go bishop g5, and okay, you can continue with bishop d3 and short castle. It's really good and very simple. Knight b4 has also been tried, and okay, many different tries, but this one is just easy and simple. After knight c5, you can simply go to c2. Otherwise, you just castle, and this is kind of a normal game where black wasted many tempos. Knight bd7 is simply going to transpose because I don't really see a way black is going to play without e5 here, and then you just go d5, and in case of h6 you always go back to e3, so this is just transposing in a weird way. c5 is also going to transpose. We're going to check that in another chapter. So after d5, e6, bishop e2, this is also covered in the Benoni chapter. So yeah, this is a direct transposition. When I try to make a whole repertoire, I also try to make as many transpositions as possible. This way we, let's say, reduce the amount of theory that we have to remember, and this way it's much easier to have like a complete repertoire without holes. And yeah, let's focus on e5, which to be honest is the main move by far, and then we go d5. So there is two different ways in general black can play this position, because one way is to play like with a knight on c5 and a pawn on a5, which he can do in different ways. He can start like this, or like this, but let's say there are different ways to start, but to be honest, it always ends up being kind of the same. This is like the most positional way black can play. There is also the direct way, and some people will play with knight h5, trying to push immediately f5. That will be kind of the main variation, or the most complex variation, okay? So for instance, let's start with a positional variation, and then we go to the most concrete way of playing. Let's start, for instance, with the move knight to a6. What do we play? Super simple. This guy always goes to g5. So in general, the reason why we developed this guy before this guy or before the queen is because after knight c5, we always wanna have knight d2 ready, and we wouldn't like to play knight d2 with a bishop on c1, because then the bishop will be a bit sad. So that's why we develop very quickly with bishop g5. So we are pinning here. The idea by pinning here is trying to get a tempo, because okay, if he moves the queen, then okay, let's say we go on a tempo. It's not like the queen on e8 is badly placed or anything, but it's just a half tempo for us. And we also kind of want to force h6, because then every time we come to e3, when he plays f5, h6 hanging, so we can get a tempo by playing queen d2. And if he gets to play king e7, sometimes we even go queen c2, and then the queen is kind of looking to the king. Or sometimes we have knight h4 and then g6 hanging. So in general, having h6 is not like a terrible thing for black, but it's definitely better for us if the pawn is on h6. So that's why we are kind of not forcing, but trying black to play h6. So there is like 1,000 moves in every position. So we are gonna cover some of the main orders, because otherwise there is literally like a 2,000 different orders. But to be honest, if you know what we are doing, is very simple. We aren't gonna get to the same all the time. Knight c5. What do you play? Knight d2. Very easy. Queen e8. When he plays queen e8, there is different ways you can play. I mean, you could simply play bishop e2, queen c2, or something like that. But to be honest, when your opponent plays queen e8, he's telling you something. He's telling you, I'm playing queen e8, and I'm playing queen e8 because I want to move this guy, and I want to play f5. So queen e8 is directly, it's directly telling you, I want to eventually play f5. And that's why after queen e8, in general, our move will be g4. Just starting some prophylactic idea against all these f5 breaks. How can the line continue after g4? I'm going to show you some ideas. Knight c5. What do you play? Every time. Knight d2. Super simple. Also, when the knight is here and there is no pawn on e5, b4 is always a move to take into consideration. So usually black will try to avoid that by playing a5. And now you don't know what to do. You keep developing pieces. Bishop on e2. Bishop on e2 is actually very useful, especially after this queen e8 and g4 idea. And the reason behind that is that sometimes this idea is. For instance, let's say knight fd7, I play whatever. Let's say a3, there is this idea. That's it's just an idea that I wanted to mention that sometimes is very strong because the queen is out of diagonals. I don't mean exactly in this position, but as I mentioned, I want you to understand the position not only with memorization, but also with ideas. So with the bishop on e2, you have many times this idea of trapping the queen like this. I mean, it's not trapping. He can play rook f7, but this is of course not a great solution for black, right? More options. He played with c6. Of course, if you already played g4, you are probably not in the mood to castle short anymore. So here you can continue with bishop e3. You're gonna push g5, trying to get this guy as passive as possible. So something like knight fd7 will be natural. Now you can continue with queen c2, trying to push h4, h5, and eventually you will long castle. More options. He can play knight d7 first. Now after knight d7, again, there is more than one way to play. I always like to play rook g1 because in general this is, of course, black wouldn't be very happy if this happens with the king on g8. I mean, we can play bishop h6, which will be really annoying. So in general, after rook g1, black will always play king h8. And now we have this bishop e2 idea again. Trick that we are trying to create. For instance, black plays f5 way too quickly. This will be a huge mistake. You take, and knight h4. We are not only threatening knight f5, but as you already know, we are threatening bishop h5. So something like f e4, for instance, will be a huge mistake. And after bishop h5, black can resign already. So that's why we use many times our bishop on e2, because we have that lovely idea with bishop h5, right? So this will be, again, very good for white. More orders, more ideas. We already checked queen e8, so let's go back. Let's say here start with a5, for instance. You go same. You go bishop g5. He go h6. You go always bishop e3. So let's go with knight a6, which is the most common way to play. How can we continue here? There is more than one good move, but I always like to start with bishop e2 because this way we keep like more flexibility with the king. You always know the plans. You already know the ideas. Knight c5. What do we play? Knight d2. This is kind of transposed to something we'll check later. Anyway, something like bishop d7 goes. You already know. Queen c2. You keep flexibility. He decides to play with c6, then we can castle short, because castling long will be a bit more dangerous. He likes to wait by playing something like queen e8. You have two choices. You can immediately go with g4, which is completely fine. You can also keep more flexibility by playing bishop e3. So if he plays c6, maybe you go to the short castle. If you play b6, in general, after b6, castling long is safer. Why? Because if he ever wants to play c6, even if you take, he cannot take with the pawn, opening the whole thing. So it's just, let's say, a slower way to attack. Although after b6, you can also start with g4, keeping more flexibility. And also after bishop d7, g5 is more annoying because the knight cannot go there. So this is like always trying to understand the ideas, trying to understand why we do one thing, other thing. Because as you can see, there is multiple options for black, there is multiple options for white. But even if it looks like it's not like a position you should remember every detail, you can actually just understand the ideas and play it. And that's why I choose this line. So let's go back a bit. More options. Queen e8 first. You can go g4, as you know. When queen goes to e8, we like to play g4. King h8, trying to play knight g8, for instance. This is a very common idea. So again, there is more than one good move in this position. Many are very interesting. My recommendation now will be the move a3, but again, like, let's imagine you don't remember and you end up playing queen c2. It's also fine. You end up playing knight d2. It's also fine. It's not like a huge catastrophe or anything. It's completely fine. Although the best move in this position is to play a3. After a3, how can black continue? Well, he has to move this guy. No, he can go to d7, for instance. After knight d7, he's trying to play f5. How can you avoid that? You already know it. You can play knight d2. As you know, if f5, then you can take, and then you can play bishop h5 ideas. So now black is kind of stuck. He could try something like knight dc5, and now there is a reason why we played a3, because you have lovely b4 now. He cannot take twice because the rook is pinned, and then black is kind of stuck here. It's very hard to continue for black. More options. He can go to g8, which, by the way, when he plays king g8 is usually the idea. Simply develop with queen c2. And after f5, in general, you want to take once with the e-pawn, takes, and castle when the knight is on g8. This way, basically, everything is going to get really, really open in the king side, and then you're trying to create some attack. Knight h4 ideas, for instance. Let's go back. Some more options. He go knight d7. Again, after knight d7, knight h6 ideas. In general, I'm very fond of playing a3. The reason is because usually black likes to put the knights like this, and then you have b4, right? Because, okay, he could play like this, and then you don't have b4, but then the knight on d7 is kind of disappointed. I mean, it's not doing much. He would like to go here. It's just stopping the bishop from working. That's why we like a3 when this is placed like this. And okay, you can just play something like knight d2, and the guy here is just not happy. f5 is again not possible because you have this kind of idea, and otherwise you know how to continue, right? So let's go back. Very simple, very easy. He plays h6. You go to e3. You already know that. More options. He go knight h5, for instance. This is actually a funny line because it might seem like black is getting a lot of tempos and a lot of the pieces plays really nice, and actually it's true, but then we are getting all those tempos back. This is one of my favorite lines. I just find it very funny because we go back, knight f4 is going up, bishop f4, f1 going up. Now you can even go knight b4, and we have to go knight b1. It looks like we've lost like 100 tempos, but it's very funny because now we get all the tempos back. So something like bishop d7 is normal. Now go back, back, go back, back, go back, back. And suddenly we are back again at a normal position with all the pieces completely fine placed by us, right? So it's kind of a funny line. By the way, something like f5 here is not really, I mean, it's an option, but you can simply go g3. And the key now is that, okay, knight cannot really go to h5 because after ef5, he cannot take here or here because g4 happens, and this is also not good because queen h5. So there is a funny trick here that black will try, which is something like knight d3. But okay, this is getting the piece back, but okay, you are a pawn up, and I mean, if the position was different and this bishop was super powerful, then it will be some compensation, but with this bishop completely stopped on e5, I don't really buy the compensation for black here. He could also try this with knight h3, but now it's important we take on f5, and this is not working anymore. So the point is, okay, he could try to create the same idea with f4, but now after knight d4, take and take. It's actually, our knight is lovely, this bishop is top, and we have a lot of attack with queen h5 and a long castle idea. So this is very nice. He could try to save it by playing something like knight g5, but after fg6, again, this is really well covered, and you can just continue with bishop g2, knight d4, and position is again really good for white. So this is nice, and just to end, I wanted to mention knight c5 is an option, and well, more than one option, but knight b3 is easy. Take, and you are usually very happy with this structure. You are either threatening some b4 ideas or simply g3, bishop e2, queen e2, slowly developing the pieces. So this is always good for white. Some more options. Knight c5. What do you play? You already know it. Knight to d2. It's very easy. If you remember these ideas, you will be able to play without memorization. He waits. He can play something like bishop d7. I think we already talked about this position in some other order. Queen c2. He played with c6 very quickly. You can just short castle. Otherwise, you can start playing with g4 and then keeping a bit flexibility and later castling long. More options. Sometimes black will try to immediately push f5. He can do that by playing something like knight h7, for instance. Now, after he moves the knight, there is two different ways you can react. So the easier way, because it's kind of always working, is to play g4. And after f5, you play like this. So you take on c5, dc5, you take on f5, and you hold like this. And then you go queen e2 and castle. You have to be careful only about one thing. Like if you take too early on f5, sorry, sometimes e4 can happen and suddenly there is like some kind of complication. So in general, you have to care a lot when you move this guy. Usually you would like to put everything in position and then take, for instance, because if you take so early, then e4 might happen and the bishop can get really, really strong. So this is an idea to play with g4, although in this particular position, playing h4 is stronger, but I just wanted to mention more ideas so you understand more possibilities. He plays with h5. Well, you can actually just attack here with h4, or with g4, sorry, takes, you can take, and after taking here, the position is really great for white with a lot of attack. And after f5 directly, which is the main line, you can take, you play h5. It's important you play h5, so this way the light square gets really weak. g5, and now you can take. Now e4 is not so dangerous anymore because this kingside is much more close and the queen is not coming to h4 as in the previous line. So playing e4, I mean, it's possible, but after taking, you can just castle short and there is no complications. Like when you've played a g4, everything is much more open and it's more crazy, right? And after taking, you place your knight here, bishop d3, queen e2, castle. You have a huge control of the light squares, and this is just very easy to play for white. He plays knight to e8, for instance. How you can play? g4 is the easier way to do it. Imagine he goes f5, you already know what to do. Take on c5, and play bishop d3. Remember, do not take here, because then things can get dirty after e4, take, and queen goes to h4, knight 2 goes to d6, rook e8, and suddenly there is a lot of activity for black. But actually, it's very different if you play like this. I mean, he could try to do the same, let's say queen h4, queen e2, knight d6, you can castle, but it's much different. With the pawn here, there is no open file, there is no open diagonal, and you can just slowly bring your pieces to better squares. Rook dg1, a3, king b1, king e2, eventually you'll take on e5, you'll put a piece on e4, and you will be very, very happy. It's very hard for black with the pawns here to actually create a counter-attack on the queen side. So this is really nice, and yeah, that's already enough for you to know about the positional line. And now let's check a bit the more complex line, which is the move knight to h5. So with knight h5, of course, what black wants to prepare is to play f5 really quickly. And in order to prepare for that, we're going to play g3. So the idea with g3 is, well, we get the h4 square for our knight. Also, we are avoiding sometimes a knight coming to f4, and also we are keeping some flexibility with other pieces. The main line here by far is to play f5 directly, although we are going to check some other options. For instance, black could try to slow things a bit by playing something like a5. Now, there is no really point of playing bishop g5 anymore, although it's possible. I like to play bishop e3 directly because we are not really pinning anymore. Options, something like knight a6. You can just go knight d2. This is a really nice idea because once you get knight d2, this plan is completely pointless because he cannot go f5 because then you can take, and this guy is simply hanging. So this is definitely not something black would like, and he also cannot take with a piece because there is always g4. So black should avoid this knight d2 idea. They should try to be faster because otherwise he's basically gonna need to come back, and he's just wasting many tempos, right? So yeah, this is nice. And okay, he could try to do something like f5 before we play knight e2. Then we can take. He of course had to take with a pawn. Again, taking with a piece simply allows g4, and there is nothing happening here besides losing a piece. So gf5. And in general here you can choose between two moves, either knight g5 or knight h4. I'm a bigger fan of knight h4, to be honest, although knight g5 might be interesting in some options, but yeah, my main consideration will always be knight h4. So the main idea is that we want to put pressure on f5. There's two main plans here for black, either going here or here. So after knight f4, in general, we don't really want to take. So the way we are playing this position is just ignoring that. He will come back to g6 eventually, and then you can just take and castle, and your plan will be to break on h5 and try to find some attack in this kind of positions, which is really, really nice. Sometimes it's also possible to take, I only leave this like an idea, but the position gets much more crazy. Sometimes this is also like an option, and play like this and try to castle, or even take here, take, but this gets much more crazy. It's also possible, and if you want to do it, I don't mean like in this position, but in general after knight f4, because as I mentioned, there is like 1,000 orders. But let's say the easier option is to just ignore the knight, play something, and after knight g6 take, and then you go to find these h4, h5 lines. And okay, if he goes to f6, then my main idea is always the same. I like to play bishop d3, so I'm attacking here. I want to provoke e4, and then I want to come back. And then the plan is that you want this guy to come here and here just to control more squares, and then you can decide whether you want to castle long or short with a very nice position. So yeah, I don't really care so much about this order. It's not so important. I mean, it's kind of weird black start with a5 and then go f5, to be honest. Knight a6, very similar. You can go bishop e3. Again, you are threatening knight d2. Like if blacks do something and then you play knight d2, this is pointless because he's not getting f5, and then the knight on h5. I mean, you can just go bishop e2 and then he come back. He's just wasting tempo. So he has to go f5, and then very similar. Take, and knight h4. I chose this line, as I mentioned, because I think it's all the time the same, and that's make our life very easy. Knight f4. How do you play? Easier way. Ignore. He has to come back, take, and you can, for instance, go bishop g5 here, followed by h4, or you can also just continue with long castle, trying to find these h4, h5 ideas. He comes to f6. You always go bishop d3, e4, and you come back. So how can this position actually develop? Well, there is different ways. Actually, the best move is knight d7, although it's already a move that, let's say, black should know a few things. Like if he plays something like this, you can just continue with queen d2 and then start like this. Knight d7, sometimes this is kind of a positional threat. I mean, you can allow it and it's fine. Like you can allow this, but then the position sometimes gets a bit tricky because also black gets some compensation. Let's say the position is kind of solid and it's interesting. So in general, I'm not such a big fan of allowing bishop c3. Sometimes you can allow it, but as I mentioned, I'm not a big fan. So I will personally play queen d2 to avoid this. Something like knight ac5 is normal. You can castle, and after knight e5, the plan now is to go f4 really quickly. So you're gonna get actually some attack. If he takes, you can take, and bishop can go to d4, and eventually this guy is kind of annoyed here on f5. So this is a nice position to play with the white pieces. And if he ignores you and plays something like knight d3, you can always try to fight to play b4, again with a nice position for white. Or you can always try to trade this guy with knight g2, knight e1. Eventually you will want to play some g4 in the middle game to endgame. So this is cool. Yeah, he can also play something like queen e2, but to be honest, doesn't really make a lot of sense. You can just go bishop e2, knight f6, and well, different ways to continue, but queen d2 is knight, followed by castle, and eventually you want to play some f3, g4 ideas, trying to open up the king side. So let's go back, and let's finally focus on the main line, which is probably what is going to happen, to be honest, which is playing immediately f5. And the good thing is that you already know the ideas, and things keep very, very similar. So we are taking on f5. He, of course, he's not allowed to take with a piece because g4 then wins, so he has to take with a g-pawn, and then we go knight h4. Every time the same. He goes to f6. You already know. Bishop d3. You put pressure here on f5. He ignores you, playing something like knight e8. This is a bit too slow, and you can always play f4. So if he takes, you you can take, and then you continue with development. Even short castle is a strong move here, but it's a bit more complicated, but it also works, and bishop f4 is also good. He tries to play e4. You can go here, you play like bishop e3, eventually you are trying to break on g4 later in the game. Of course, not now, but bishop e3, queen d2, castle, king h2, rook g1, eventually trying to push e4. Anyway, knight e8 is kind of weird. Playing e4 is much more natural, and you know how this goes. Bishop e2, knight fd7. You can actually allow this take here. It's a bit different because black doesn't really have so much time. You have some bishop h6 ideas. Although you can also start by playing knight b5 here, but there is some f4 and then it gets a bit crazy. So I will simply go knight g2 here and don't allow that. And after knight g2, as I mentioned, taking here is not the same because now you have some bishop h6 ideas. So knight e6 the normal move, and now knight b5 is nice. And this way you avoid this f4 option, which is annoying. And now your plan is to continue like this. Knight d4, bishop e3, knight f4, something like this. Knight ac5, knight f4, threatening something like this. Knight e5, you can go bishop e3, eventually knight d4, then find some short castle. The knight on f4 is lovely, it's defending everything. You always have some jumps to h5, so it's just an easier position to play with the white pieces. So this is good. And after knight f4, which is probably the main move, there is like 1,000 different move orders here for white. I mean, you could easily play bishop d2, and after knight g6, just try to play this position, trying to long castle. This is an option, and I also encourage you to play this sometimes. I mean, it's a nice position for white, and it's easy to play. But I wanted to mention this option because it's kind of new, and I think it's very easy to make a mistake here with the black pieces, and that's why it's going to be my main recommendation. But as I mentioned, it's also possible to play bishop d2, and then after knight g6, taking, playing this position with queen c2, h4, h4 idea, h4, h5 ideas, and it's also nice to play with white, but I like rook g1. So the idea with rook g1 is that actually gf4 becomes kind of a big threat because now the rook is already looking. So, okay, something like knight a6, let's say, this is very strong, take, and, but sorry. Here, so after knight a6, then gf4 is a huge threat because take, and bishop g5 is happening. This is completely pinned. So yeah, definitely black is having a lot of issues in this position. So we are kind of forcing black to come back to g6. Now you can take and play h4. And I know the first thing you can actually think about this is, Miguel, it doesn't have any kind of sense that we could have this position with this guy on d2. Our castle is much closer. Now our rook on g1, it doesn't make sense because we want to open the h file. I know, it looks like this, right? But it's not. It's not that obvious. The line is very complex. So one of the ideas, for instance, is that after e4, we have this lovely transfer. We can go to f4 with the knight. So we can play like knight f4, a5, bishop e2, and you have the idea with playing with the knight on f4. You can go king f1, king here, bishop e3, and this is very safe and nice with white. So knight d7 will be the main move here for black. And now comes the idea. You play h5. So usually with the rook and h1, sometimes black can continue with g5. And it's not so obvious how we can answer to this. But now there is this very strong idea, g4, thanks to the rook on g1. And okay, f4 is never good for black because we can just get a nice blockade here with a postpawn, and this is just very easy to play for white. So usually he will have to take, but now the rook on g1 make all the sense in the world, and actually black is dead loss here. So after h5, black is forced to take, and then with queen take, we already managed to open up everything, and this is very dangerous position for black. Something like knight f6 can happen. Now you can move your queen to many different ways, although queen d1 is my favorite idea, and now the plan is just to castle. So something like bishop d7, you can play queen c2, queen e7, you go bishop g5, you castle, and then you try to find some counterplay in the king side. Very simple, very nice idea, and I really love because I think many people will attempt to play g5 and then we'll get a lot of attack. Anyway, as I mentioned, rook g1 is not the only move. It's also my recommendation to go like bishop d2, and you can also play like this kind of position with queen c2, castle, bishop g5 ideas, which is also nice and very interesting. So you have like two different lines to be changing between. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I know it's like a complex chapter. I know there is like many move orders, but in general, I don't think you should like learn by full memory all of this. I think if you understand the ideas, is good enough and you'll be able to play this position with good results. So I hope you enjoyed the chapter and see you in the next one.
Access ChessEnigma's free sample lessons. Enjoy videos, interactive exercises, and a digital board to practice anywhere on any device. Sign up for free and start improving your chess from home today.